and welcome to Republic of Football live in studio. I'm your host, Ishmael Johnson, the assistant managing editor at Dave Campbell's Texas Football and the managing editor of Dave Campbell's Texas Basketball, which is a product that actually exists, believe it or not. I'm here in studio, live, on camera, with Mike Craven, with both of us having a live mic.
Yeah, I don't know whose idea that was. I'm bringing my face made for podcast to live streaming, and we'll see what that does to viewership.
Oh, that will same. Like I said, I had a career in radio before this, so
neither one of us wanted this.
No,
right? We graduated from college, and we weren't like, let's get on.
I'm going to type. I'm going to talk, but not be on anything on screen, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
because I went into writing because of F7.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
There's none of that here.
Right.
So that makes me nervous.
Right. So Mike Craven, our college football insider, who, like I mentioned, has a live mic for some reason. If you're wondering how we're on TV right now, or your computer screen or whatever, then I can turn to our producer extraordinaire, Mallory Hartley. Malpal.
Hey guys.
Hello.
How's it going?
It is going well.
I'm used to being in the seat when I produce TFT, but it's still really different, being here for the Republic of Football. I know, it's nice.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying it.
You're
so far.
Maverick over there.
We are rep and running, so.
Yeah. So on today's show, we'll be having some fun with State 7-on-7 coming up. We have a little draft kind of with making our own 7-on-7 teams with college players in the state. So we'll be doing that. And then after that, we'll be continuing our interview series where we're previewing every FBS program in the state. We'll have Carlos Silva of the Lubbock Avalanche-Journal on, Texas Tech beat writer, talk about the Red Raiders. Well, timely, of course. We've released our cover, the magazine, with Coach Joey McGuire and Coach Jeff Traylor. But before we get into any of that, if you're new, right, you probably got a notification being like, what the hell's this? All right, what is it? Republic of Football, what's going on here? We are a weekly college football podcast. We cover all 12 FBS programs in the state. We even go sub-FBS, right? Last year, Mike Craven went to SFA Sam Houston. We talked about that. We've had Coach Keeler and Coach Carthel on. And if you're wondering about the vibe, right, you probably listen to us on Spotify or Apple. If you're watching us live right now, thank you, for staying with us, and we hope you kind of make this part of your, media consumption now. But we wanted to give this a try, right? First, let me clarify: we will be on Wednesdays.
Yes.
Too. We have 7-on-7 coming up this week, so we're out tomorrow. So that's why we're on a Tuesday. But Wednesdays at 2, we will be live here. Of course, we'll still be releasing it on Apple, Spotify, everywhere else you get your podcasts. And when it comes to the vibe, though, I know you probably watched another internet show at around noon, right? Different vibe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Different. That's the professionals, right? That's the suits, right? That's
we are, in fact, not professionals.
Look,
they wanted this.
I was about to say, like, here's the difference, right? You have two people that are on TV, right, in regards to the show at noon. I'm not plugging them because we do that enough here.
The show, like we need it, like Michigan, Ohio State,
right? Yeah,
like how they never like
the asterisk, the M or whatever.
The show up north,
right? The show up north,
the show at noon,
the mothership show,
the mothership.
So you have that show, right? You have their bits, right? Oh, it's 420, 69 days till Thanksgiving or whatever they do, right? That's not us, right? That is not us at all. They have NBA Countdown versus Inside the NBA, right? ESPN versus TNT, right? Come chill with us every week. So, that's a little bit of that. Like I mentioned, it's a lot more chill. It's two guys not made for TV. And an incredible producer who's been on, done great work producing behind the scenes for TFD before. But,
we're just very different. Yes.
We're very different.
Yeah.
So if you want to come hang out with us, right, take a chill pill.
Fewer Simpsons jokes.
Fewer
Simpsons jokes.
Fewer Simpsons
maybe
jokes.
There may be some hip hop references too, so that'll be
and some professional wrestling.
Yeah. Oh, pro wrestling. Oh my God. Yeah.
Oh
my God.
boy, I'm in for it. Gosh.
Yeah, Mallory, welcome back to the show. So yeah, if you want to break from all of that, come hang out with us.
Yes.
So, Mallory, before I get into our first segment, do we have an announcement?
Yes, we have, since this is our first show going live, we're going to do something a little special that they don't even do on TFT. If you are joining us either on YouTube, on Twitter, or Facebook, leave a comment that you're watching the show or how you like it, maybe some suggestions, what you'd like to see more of, what you'd like to see less. Just leave a comment and your name will be entered into a drawing for a free Republic of Football shirt. A shirt that we don't even have. So you will be ahead of us in that game. So make sure to leave a comment, whatever. that you like, and you'll be entered into that drawing. We'll message you on probably Twitter or something like that. We'll get your address, and we'll send it straight to you.
Yep.
So
yeah. There you go. Start commenting.
Start commenting. Yes.
All right.
Fill our comment sections.
So let's get this segment going. All right. I mentioned 7-on-7, right? We got State 7-on-7 coming up this weekend. We're all except Craven, because, he got out of it smartly. We'll all be sweating in College Station this next week, the rest of the week, I should say. And so we decided, let's put a little topical flavor to the discussion before we talk to Carlos. And so we're going to do a little draft, right? We're not exactly drafting the most logical 7-on-7 teams, right? We know how 7-on-7 teams are constructed. We're just basically drafting 7 positions, right? As opposed to like 7 rosters or whatever. We're not filling out a perfect field or whatever. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Mallory, do you want to conduct this? How are we going to do this? Because we should probably figure out a way to draft, how we're going to
so we actually came up with a draft format yesterday. I can go ahead and start. So we're each going to pick a quarterback, a running back, a wide receiver, an offensive line, and a defensive line as a unit. We're not going player by player for that, just because it would take too long. A linebacker, a defensive back, and then at the very end, we're going to pick a coach. So then as a whole, that will be our complete 7-on-7 team. And I think we're going to pick players that we think will be, they're not necessarily the best players in Texas.
Sure.
They're basically the players that we think would fit or do really well at 7-on-7.
Yeah.
So without further ado, I'll go ahead and start with the quarterback. Let's see. I went ahead and picked Tanner Mordecai from SMU. I think this dude is a total gunslinger. He's got a quick release, and I think he's also a great decision maker. He can make decisions like that right on the spot. I think he'd be a great quarterback at 7-on-7.
Yeah, I could go somebody else, but I'm going to kind of probably skip the line when it comes to the rankings of quarterbacks that we have in the state. I'm going Frank Harris at UTSA. When I think of a quarterback who the issues with Frank Harris are anything beyond 20, 30, 40 yards, right? That's kind of where his negative has been. You don't really need that in 7-on-7. You need somebody who's elite from 10 to 20 yards. Yeah. I think Frank Harris is that. I think he's somebody who can move around. Obviously, you only get 4 seconds or whatever to throw. But I think he's somebody who can move, find something to happen, make something happen, get a little dump-off pass if he needs to. I'm going Frank Harris as my quarterback.
I love it.
I feel like y'all are handing me this one.
Sure.
I think if I had the number 1 pick, I would have taken Clayton Tune. I'd get him at number 3. 3,500 yards last year, 30 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, or 10 interceptions. 4 of those came in the first game. So only 6 interceptions the last 13 games, really turned the corner. I love him as a 7-on-7 quarterback. He can move around a little bit, can throw on the run. So I get to start there with the number 3 pick on what I believe could be the best quarterback in the state.
Very true. Very true. All right, we're going snake on this.
So yeah.
Craven,
you're up next now.
Running
back. This one felt like the easiest pick in the entire draft. Like Bijan Robinson, in my mind, for my money, is the best player in the state when he's healthy, just overall talent-wise. Like when I was on the recruiting trail, I saw 2 guys that were like, oh, that dude's an NFL player. One was Trevor Lawrence at the Nike opening. The other one was Bijan Robinson when I went out to Arizona. He's a stud, and I think even in a 7-on-7 format, with how well he catches the ball out of the backfield like we saw last year, he can be a real weapon.
Yep.
Sure. I went with Devon Shane. I think if you have somebody who is able to line up at wide receiver if you need him to, right, in a pinch, somebody who can flare out of the backfield and catch a pass, I think that you need that in 7-on-7 game. I also think he's in for a pretty big breakout year now that Isaiah Spiller's out. And so we've seen flashes of it, right? He's been that big play running back for A&M for a couple years now, and now it's like, okay, now he's the feature back. I'm really excited to see what he can do. I think outside of Bijan Robinson, you're not going to find many running backs in the open field that are more dynamic than he.
Yeah, fastest kid in the state.
Easily.
Yeah. Up next was me. I picked Taj Brooks from Texas Tech. He caught 6 passes for 58 yards last year out of the backfield. I think he's a quick guy, and I think he's able to spot those holes pretty quickly. I think he'd be a good wide receiver.
I do think it's important to note, like Alton McCaskill from Houston,
he would be on this list.
He'd be definitely probably our first pick, I'm sure.
Definitely one of the top running backs if he was healthy, but he tore his ACL and may not even play in 2022.
Yeah, and I mean we should also mention like other like Trey Siggers, things like that, like guys who would be in the discussion, right?
Yeah.
But the states, I think
like
we're in a pretty good
Wheaton
spot when it comes to exactly Kamar Wheaton. Like we're in a pretty good spot when it comes to running back depth going on. Mallory, you're up again, wide receiver.
Yes, I think this one's pretty obvious. Vegas, I picked Xavier Worthy from Texas. I think he's an extremely fast guy who can really create that space between him and the defender. So I think he'd be a good another 7-on-7 wide receiver.
I think it goes. There's two, right? There were two names when it came to wide receiver, and I think there's not a huge drop off, but then a drop off.
Yeah.
I'm taking the other guy, Tank Dell from Houston. I think that outside of Xavier Worthy, I can't think of a more explosive playmaker for what I think he's helped mask a lot of Toon's weaknesses when he had that option out there, right? To be like somebody's in trouble, I need an outlet. There's Nathaniel Dell, and he's going to get a big play going.
Yeah.
And so I think he's complemented Clayton Toon's growth as well. And yeah, I think if you just have, I think it's one of those two first. Whoever had the first two picks, I think was going to take one of those two. And then after that, it's more of a discussion. But Craven, who are you looking at?
Yeah, speaking of just Worthy and Dell, like one of the toughest decisions in the magazine was figuring who do I pick as best wide receiver in the state?
Sure.
Because both of those guys are deserving. Like Worthy as a true freshman was incredible. Nathaniel Dell, when he plays in the slot, may be the best slot receiver in college football. He struggles on the outside sometimes because he's only like 155 pounds and you can jam him and stuff like that. But in the slot and in a place like 7-on-7 where you're not supposed to be physical and that kind of stuff, he's a really good wide receiver in the slot. I had a tough one. I think wide receiver is the deepest position in the state.
Sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Zachary Franklin at UTSA was a name that came to mind. I'm a UTSA Roadrunner, so that was a hard one to pass up. But I went with Quentin Johnston, the wide receiver from TCU. Averaged 19.2 yards a catch. I'd imagine if we had a slam dunk competition in the state between college football players, he's winning. I've seen him do a 360 between the leg, like legit dunk at a camp one time when he was in high school. Like just a freak athlete that I don't know you could find somebody to cover him. Like I don't know who's jumping with him if I just throw up the ball. So my plan is just Clayton Toon, just throw it up. Quentin Johnston goes get it. You play two high safety. We're giving it to Bajan.
I was about to say,
we're cooking right now.
You think of that gadget player, right? That could also be an option somewhere else, right? You could spell out Bajan or whatever and put Quentin Johnston back there and line him up out of the backfield, like just anything, like that. I think he's a pretty impressive pick. And
because the other two guys are skinny.
Sure.
Like they're smaller, skinny guys. Like Quentin Johnston's
you want a bully.
Man.
Yeah, you want to bully a wide receiver.
Man. And I've been to enough 7-on-7 to know that those dudes win a lot of battles.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, and then offensive line. So this is a little bit different. I just wanted a way to get offensive line, defensive line involved. I think we skip the big guys too much in these type of conversations. So we're going to do it as a unit. I think the clear and away best offensive line in the state is Baylor. 4 out of 5 starters back. Connor Galvin,
probably the best
left
offensive
tackle.
line coach right now, and Eric Mateus.
Yeah. I mean, some of it's the wide zone, that they run. Because that, what's crazy is that offensive line struggled a lot in 2020. And, pretty much the same group of guys other than Jacob Gall at center come back in 2021 and become the best offensive line, or at least one of the best offensive lines in the nation. Definitely the best in the state. Connor Galvin, Big 12 Offensive Lineman of the Year last year. He's back. Jacob Gall at center is back. So a lot of really good players there. They led Abram Smith had 1,600 and something yards, broke a record at Baylor behind those guys. So I'm picking the Baylor offensive line as the best offensive line in the state. All
right. I'm going with A&M. Obviously, they have some holes to replace this year, but I think you have two guys in Bryce Foster and Ruben Fothery. I mean, you give me a tackle, you give me an elite guard, I think I can make the rest work, right? Yeah. So I think those two guys kind of make the rest of the building around whatever you're replacing easier. And so I think you have athletes as well, right? Those are guys that can move. I know, again, 7-on-7 is not incredible 1-to-1, but we wanted to include the guys here because it's easier to say, I don't know, Bryce Foster can snap a ball in 7-on-7, right? It's easier. It's easier just to include them this way as opposed to I don't know who's going to hold the ball and hold the marker that they use in the field.
What's been awesome about this Texas A&M offensive line is we know Fothery and Foster are future stars. A guy who's really emerging is Layden Robinson.
Interesting.
The more and more preseason magazines that are coming out and the big articles, Layden Robinson is a guy who's going to be really good at guard, who may creep up the NFL draft boards as well.
Valerie, what you got?
I went with the North Texas offensive line. I think that this unit, had to do it. You set me up for it.
Not even 15 minutes into the
You set me up for it. I think this unit as a whole was one of the main reasons that the Mean Green were able to reach 6 wins last year. Of course, they do have a couple of holes to fill. It was not quarterback. It was not quarterback. They do have a couple of holes to fill. Jacob Brahmer, of course, transferring to Vanderbilt, but they are led by is it Manasseh Mose? Is that how you pronounce it, Craven? Manasseh Mose. I think they're just a big physical unit up front, and I think they'd be a great unit.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that, like, one of the cool things to watch this year is there's going to be, like, 6-year starters.
Sure.
Which sounds insane,
That's
right?
right.
Like with 2020 not counting and all that kind of stuff. Like, you have legit 6-year seniors that could start 60 games, and he's one of them. I think
60 games, that's right.
He enters the year with 48. So
that's crazy.
If they play
nuts.
12, he's at 60. If they, play in a bowl game and a conference championship game, and he could really leave college with 62 starts.
That's absurd.
At offensive line. Like, that's NFL tenure.
Yeah.
I know. That's just wild.
like he's gonna get like a residency at North Texas or something like that. So that's just amazing. That's just like another little layer to why. I agree with you at North Texas. I think some people will see this on social media and be like, North Texas, how can they be the? They're really good. Like, North Texas scored 32 rushing touchdowns last year. Like, I'm a big believer, and this is probably something that'll be picked up if you listen to the podcast. Like, give me the running. If you're talking the running game, offensive line's bigger, more important piece than running back.
Right.
Like, I think rush yards are more indicative of how good you are at offensive line than running back. North Texas, I think some people will scoff. They'll see Baylor, A&M, North Texas, and feel like there's this drop-off. There's really not. Like, that North Texas offensive line, like, peer-to-peer, like, for their level, is as dominant and as good as some of those other ones we mentioned.
For sure.
All right, now let's switch over to the defense. The defensive line I chose was Baylor. Not really much of a shock here. Probably one of the best defensive lines in the state. They're big physical guys, able to get to the quarterback quickly, and I think they averaged like 3.5 sacks a game last year, so really not a surprise there.
Yeah. I went a little off the beaten path. I want UTEP because
How about the Miners?
I think you have one of the best defensive linemen in the state in Praise Amawule. I think you have one of the things that they were able to, for all the praise that their passing offense got, right? We talked about all the time how they were kind of mediocre as far as like down to down, but they would hit these explosive plays. Justin Garrett and oh my God, I'm already forgetting the other one.
Jacob
Cowing, Jesus. And that kind of like masked a lot of their inconsistencies on offense. But consistently, game in, game out, it was that defensive line. It was that front seven that kept them in the game because, again, they weren't holding on to the ball a lot. It was those one or two big plays that would kind of swing a game because their defense kept them in so many so many contests. And so I think it was that front seven, more specifically that defensive line led by Praise Amawule with 5.5 sacks as interior defensive lineman, which is pretty damn impressive.
Yeah, JJ and Taylor is also really good. Keegan Stewart there at defensive tackle. I love that front seven. I really the UTEP defense is great. Dennis Bard, secondary, really good. What's interesting about Baylor, like we just had Baylor be the first pick on the offensive line, first pick of the defensive line, and there's not going to be another Baylor player on there.
Right.
Like they're going to be a very interesting case study of like, they say you win in the trenches. Well, like they're going to have to win in the trenches.
Yeah.
Like we're about to find out how true that adage is. I went with SMU. Like I think that they're probably the most underrated defensive line. When you look at it, Turner Cox on the outside. You got, I have it right here. Elijah Chapman on the inside at defensive. Jalen Samuels is somebody who came out of spring practice with a lot of praise. So I think they're deep. I think they're talented. And then with this new system coming in, I think that they're going to be unleashed and used in a way this year with that 4-man front that's going to really help the bodies there. I think SMU is going to have. We think of SMU as an offensive team, and they'll probably continue to be that with Rhett Lashley. But this defense has a chance to be better than it has the last couple of years, and that's going to help them towards the end of the year. SMU's kind of had really good starts the last 3 or 4 years and then faded off. I think with that front seven being better, with the defensive line being better, they have a chance to really make some noise late in the year.
Sure.
It's you now again.
Oh, yeah, Snake.
Me again.
Snake.
Me again. The 3-person thing is kind of hard because
I know.
You're like constantly going 2 in a row. I had the first pick linebacker. I went to Marvion Overshone.
Homer.
Texas, right? Yeah, I covered a lot of those recruiting
second
classes.
Texas guy on the list.
I know. There's going to be another one. Like you forget about bias, right? Like when you're like unaware biases. Right? And I covered all these guys when I was doing recruiting at the Statesman. Overshone, 5-star safety out of ARP. I feel like in a 7-on-7 setting, he's the ideal linebacker. Big, long, rangy, can play in space, not afraid to cover. So for these purposes, I would pick him as the kind of most equipped linebacker for playing against the spread.
Sure. I disagree. I think that there is another linebacker who's probably more equipped to play 7-on-7, and that is North Texas Katie Davis.
Yes.
I need somebody,
Shark.
and when I'm thinking 7-on-7, obviously I'm thinking of somebody who needs to cover sideline to sideline, right? And I think that's somebody like a KD Davis who 121 tackles, 5.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, or fumble recoveries, I should say, 16 tackles for loss. He can cover so much of that field on his own, often did for North Texas last year. I think that's somebody who in open space is somebody reliable, and I think he's probably the best linebacker in the state.
Yeah.
And I think that he's somebody who I would love to have in my 7-on-7 team.
Yeah. I went with D. Winters out of TCU.
I like that.
Really think that he's probably one of the best defensive players that TCU is going to have this year. He also had 2 interceptions on the year last year, so I would love to have that dude on my 7-on-7 team.
I think he's aimed for a big year. Like going into last year, there was a lot of expectations for Winters, and that front 7 was just so bad. You know, like he's
like Hodges Tomlinson too.
Right.
I mean, both those guys is like, oh man, they didn't live up to the hype. I was like, they were left on islands.
And
so
like Winters is a linebacker that needs block eaters up in front of him.
Yeah.
Like, and
he's not a 130 tackle guy.
Right. Like he's somebody who needs some space, and like he needs a couple defensive tackles who just occupy blocks, and he runs around and makes plays. Like TCU just didn't have that this year. Sonny Dykes is bringing in an odd man front with Joe Gillespie, a defensive coordinator, and I think they're going to have more of those big guys up front that allow like a Shadrick Banks, a D. Winters just to run around, Marcel Brooks to just be athletic and run around and make plays. It'll be a complete. Watching the TCU defense this year is going to be like Twilight Zone stuff.
Well, speaking of that, I've completely forgot that Shadrick Banks was a linebacker for TCU. So, like, I just went back. I was like, you said Shadrick Banks. I was like, oh, right, he is a linebacker now, huh?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've just watched the 4-2-5. Like, you watch TCU.
Right, run the
Gary
same,
Patterson's
the same
4-2-5
defense
for our whole adult lives.
Right.
Like, you know, I was 17 years old when Gary Patterson became the head coach at TCU. So,
Jerry Hughes' NFL career came and went.
Right.
In that time span.
And we're about to watch them play an odd man front.
Yeah.
And it's going to be odd.
That's weird. Yeah.
I had the next pick going into defensive backs. I put Antonio Johnson out of A&M, which is probably a pretty obvious choice.
Best defensive player in the state.
For sure. Big, fast dude who can definitely be utilized in different spots in the secondary. So definitely like him as my DB.
I think that's his number one skill set, honestly.
I think so, too.
Like, he can play corner, he can play nickel, he can play safety.
Yep.
Like, that's just a guy. Like that's like he's just counting down days. Like if you're an Aggie fan, you just pencil him into the NFL draft in 2024. Right?
Exactly. He's a first rounder for sure.
He's unbelievable. He's excellent.
Yeah, and he kind of got overshadowed for a little bit on that stacked defense last year. Now he's going to be one of the guys kind of breaking through. I mentioned him. My pick, Hodges Tomlinson. Like, I think he's somebody who's in for a better year. Again, I think when you lose the help that they had at the secondary heading into last year, you have a front 7 that just does not produce a pass rush at all. And you're getting carved up in the run as well. Like, the front 7 was just really bad, and specifically defensive line. And so I think now having help there, I think he's now in a better position to not be left on an island, to not be left basically saying, yeah, cover the receivers that are going to have 5-7 seconds to run free, right? Eventually they're just going to get away from you, right?
Yeah.
I think he's going to have a lot easier of a time getting around that and being able to cover his spots. So I'm taking him. I think he's kind of a breakout candidate. He's somebody who's already good, and we already acknowledge him as being one of the better defensive backs in the state. But I think now it's going to be somebody who's more known probably on a national stage heading into the end of the year.
I mean, that TCU defense was bad last year, and he was still first team all Big 12. Like
Exactly.
that's just like how good he is and how much respect he gets in this league. He had to play some safety last year, which was out of position. So he'll just get to play cornerback this year, and it'll be 10-on-10 football, right? Like if you're playing against TCU, go throw it against somebody else. Why take your chances on there? I went with Rashad Wisdom, UTSA safety. He was the first kid I wrote a story on when I got this job. I'm a big fan of him. I covered him when he was coming out of Judson. He was with DeMarvin Leal, Sincere McCormick, that really good Converse Judson team that really helped turn UTSA around with McCormick on offense, Wisdom on defense. Frank Harris also part of that same group. So, he's a guy who can cover from the deep position, but he's just a leader, and he's an organizer, and he's always where you want him to be. And 7-on-7, that can be a pretty valuable thing. I think y'all took the 2 best corners in the state, so it was like, okay, I'll take the best safety.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty telling that for the past couple of years, now that he's been there, it's been Frank Harris and Rashad Wisdom, right? As far as like the faces of UTSA, everybody talks about Sincere McCormick and Sakari Franklin and all that, but like when you look at them doing charity work or promo or anything like
Right.
that. It's those two guys, and I think it's pretty clear that like Jeff Traylor, that was a thing that was under Frank Wilson too. Pretty clear that he trusted those guys, and now that Jeff Traylor's taken over, like he's clearly came in and said, "Oh, these two guys from San Antonio, they love the city, they love the program. Like they're the guys that you want marketing."
When Jeff Traylor was hired, he had his press conference and he asked the athletic director at the time, like, who are a couple of the guys on the team that I need to call tonight?
Mm-hmm.
And Rashad Wisdom was his first call. Because like that is the dude there.
Right.
If he was 4 inches taller, he would have been a 5-star recruit with
Right.
pick of wherever he wanted to go. Like he's been productive at every level he plays, and there's just not many young men that are as good at leading as Rashad Wisdom. He's just like he's just gonna be one of those guys that's successful at whatever he's gonna do. He's gonna run a
Right.
Fortune 500 company or something like that. Like whatever he decides to do, he's gonna be good.
Sure. All right, coaches,
Let's round it all out, Craven.
let's do it.
Okay, I went back to my University of Texas Austin American Statesman roots. Well, we're playing 7-on-7. I'm taking Steve Sarkisian. Listen,
Very
like
true.
I
don't
get
have
it.
to- I don't have
Throw
to
your
block-
horns up.
I don't
Throw
have
your
to- I
horns
don't have
up.
to block anybody. I don't have to go sack the quarterback.
Right.
Right? We're just talking about 7-on-7, and the dude's a wizard. Chris
Yeah.
Jericho,
Yeah.
Steve Sarkisian. Like just absolute wizards, and I would
Wrestling
just
reference number
yeah,
one on the show.
I had to fit one in by the time we got to our first interview. I just feel like if I was to enjoy watching anybody call a 7-on-7 game,
Yeah.
and there's not many people who could make me enjoy any type of 7-on-7 game because it's just recess.
Sure.
I would pick Steve Sarkisian to be that guy because some of the stuff he would call would be amazing.
I love it. Ish is currently done.
That's all 7-on-7 is. While Ish is laughing, let's take to the first Craven's Corner, which is a rant.
That's
on
our newest
7-on-7.
segment, by the way. It's going to be Craven's Corner. So if you've got any ideas
Where
for
it's just
that,
like
let us
me being an
know.
old man on a hill, and mine is 7-on-7 is just recess. That's all it is. Like if you go to Duncanville Middle School right now, 5th period, and walk outside, you can
You're
watch
serious?
7-on-7, and it's going to be better than 90% of the people that make it to College Station because they're like from towns with
That-
150 people in.
That's also a hot take,
Right,
too.
so we don't have to pretend to like 6-man football
Oh
here
God.
or 7-on-7.
Anyway, I'm moving on to that. That's where you pull the ripcord on that.
Y'all gave me a live mic.
We did give you a live mic.
We did.
I warned everybody.
First mistake number one, honestly.
Everybody, when
Anyway.
this idea was presented to me, I went to
I
everybody.
gotta
and was
pick
like,
a coach, Craig.
Okay, sorry.
That was
Reeling
good.
it back in here.
Oh God! All right. So on that line of thinking, and with another wrestling reference, I'm picking the Orange Cassidy of Texas coaches. Picking Jake Spavital.
Homer.
Damn right, it's over. Look, what's 7-on-7 about? It's about getting a couple yards here and there, getting your first down, right?
Yep.
Inching your way down the field, right? For all of people's complaints about Jake Spavital, it's a man that loves short routes, loves tunnel screens, loves the way to maneuver his way down the field very meticulously.
Yeah.
Somebody who's calm, right? 7-on-7 can get a little frantic when you're
That's
starting
true.
to realize you got 30 seconds to score a touchdown and try to get a pick or whatever. He's calm.
Yeah.
He's
Still
all
calls
good.
his own plays.
Still calls his own plays. It's all good, baby.
See, that's the thing you got to think about with 7-on-7, too. Like,
Yeah.
you need to have people who can really perform under pressure, like more than probably anything else because it is such a quick game, you know? So you may go ahead and round it.
Like he's the air raid guy,
Right.
So like,
Exactly,
he's been
exactly.
playing 7-on-7 his whole life.
Right.
Speaking of another air raid guy, I chose to round it all out as my coach, Dana Holgerson of Houston. Pretty
That's a
obvious
great pick.
Yeah, complete air raid guy mindset. You're going to throw the ball all over the field. Love it.
Yeah.
Return
That's
into
my
his
dude.
roots because he told me he got kicked out of the air raid because he runs the ball too much. 7-on-7, you won't have to worry about that.
I was about to say,
He
yeah.
gets to be himself, the Kevin Cobb version of Dana Holgerson.
I'm down for that.
So before we go ahead and go, I can just throw up these graphics real
Sure,
quick of
yeah.
our teams.
We'll put these up on social,
We're going to put
too.
these up on social as well,
With a
so you
poll,
can go
correctly?
and yes,
Okay.
we'll put a poll up there too. You can go and vote to see whose team is the best, or whose team, better yet, whose team would win.
Yeah.
7-on-7.
Whose
Who
team would-
win
if
the whole
these
thing. We'll do
teams
a
played
round
off,
robin
right.
kind of thing, yeah. And so whose team would win it all? So we'll
Sure.
first go with mine. We got Tanner Mordecai at quarterback, Taj Brooks running back, Xavier Worthy at wide receiver, the North Texas offensive line, the Baylor defensive line, D. Winters of TCU, Antonio Johnson of A&M, and Dana Holgerson of Houston.
I think you have the best defense.
Oh, for sure. I think
Yeah, I
so, too.
think
I
so,
was going to
too.
say that.
That's
I
pretty
think we got
impressive.
rounded out. And Ishmaels. You got Frank Harris at quarterback, Devon Achane at running back, Nathaniel Dell at wide receiver, the Texas A&M offensive line, the UTEP defensive line, Katie Davis, linebacker, Travius Hodges-Tomlinson at defensive back, and Jake Spavital for coach.
Sorry,
If we go to a track meet?
Yes, I'm sorry. I got the most fun offense.
Yeah.
You really got
I got the most
That's
fun
going to be a
offense.
quick
Yes,
game if you got that
easily.
offense.
Oh my God, yes.
That's a lot of speed.
That's a lot of speed. And round it out, we got Craven's team. Got Clayton Toon at quarterback.
a lot of burnt orange.
There's a lot of burnt orange on there. Bijan Robinson at running back, Quentin Johnston at wide receiver, Baylor offensive line, SMU defensive line, DeMarvion Overshone at linebacker, Rashad Wisdom at defensive back, and Steve Sarkisian at coach. Once again, we're going to put those up. That is a lot of Longhorns. Once again, we're going to put those up on Twitter, and you guys can vote on whose team
we're going to win the first half.
Victorious. Yeah.
That's very true.
We're going to be up. We're going to be up going in halftime.
Yep. Whatever happens after that, that's up to you because
we don't know.
You got Steve Sarkisian, your head
We'll
coach,
see.
buddy. So we'll
We'll
see
see.
about that. That's a team that by November, everybody's like, why isn't the other quarterback starting?
Right.
Why is Steve Sarkisian still calling plays? Why is our defense still giving? Anyway, I can go on for
Be like Clayton Toon's thumb is like 8 times the size. You know?
Yeah. Alrighty. So before we get into our interview, let me remind you guys of some things. We published our cover stories on TexasFootball.com. If you listened to this episode after we did the cover reveal, you heard me and Mike Raven really stressing out about nobody being able to read our cover stories and how nerve-wracking that is. So we fixed that. We just put it out anyway for subscribers. If you are a subscriber at TexasFootball.com, you can go read. We just published Craven's main feature on Monday. We're recording this on Tuesday, so yesterday, but this went out. My cover story over South Oak Cliff and kind of inner city football making a resurgence is up as well. And by the way, I know we've harped on the paper supply issue, right, as far as like delaying the retail magazine. I will say, if you subscribed by last week, check your mail over the next week. If you subscribed in the coming week or so, check your mail over the next coming weeks, right? We made sure to prioritize subscribers when it came to that. Consider that a little extra incentive if you're on the fence about becoming a subscriber. Anyway, let us continue our interview series where we talk to beat writers around the state with Carlos Silva of the Lubbock Avalanche-Journal. Carlos, how you doing, buddy?
Finding you all. Appreciate you having me on the live show.
Yeah, for sure, man. This is, of course, when we decided to do Texas Tech, we're like, look, there's one guy that I had in mind for this, and of course,
it's Don Williams.
we couldn't get Don Williams.
He didn't call us back.
Yeah, exactly. So, but no, how you doing over there, buddy? How's Lubbock?
Doing fine, man. Just getting used to the heat, as I'm sure the rest of Texas is. But the windy days are kind of nice. It's just it feels like an oven on some of those windy days. So,
I bet.
Just getting used to the old summer days.
Yeah. First question I kind of want to go with, Joey McGuire, obviously hired as Texas head coach, hit the ground running when it came to recruiting. I believe they're still sitting at technically number 2 in 247's rankings. So obviously there's still a whole season to play, and those rankings will kind of shake out once teams like Bama and things get going. But I think it says something how quickly he's been to ingratiate himself into that recruiting market around the state. I think it was something that people looked at when they hired Joey McGuire, saying this is something that could be possible. What have you seen as what he's kind of selling for Texas Tech? Because this is a team that, struggled to get to a bowl, fired their coach even though they got to a bowl, right? And it was kind of a weird situation for the past couple of years. What's he done to kind of sell this program and what it could be heading into the fall?
Well, I think that the most important thing, and you guys kind of touched on it on the cover piece, it's just that not only do you have Texas Tech coming into your high school, but a lot of coaches, especially in the area in Lubbock, have talked about you also have Joey McGuire, the man, coming in. And I think that's really what he's selling, is the brand, as he likes to call it, is he wants this West Texas tough type of team. And it started with Sonny Cumbie last year, getting that oil rig going onto the sideline. So he's really built on that. And then not only when you have that, but when you get talented players and, that's what they're trying to do right now, it's going to turn into something that could be special. And I think in the general sense, that's what he's selling, is if you're able to play hard and you develop yourself over the course of your time here at Texas Tech. And not only that, but then the transfer portal is also helping things a little bit when you look at, you don't necessarily have to wait those typical 2 to 3 years to develop a guy on the football on the football team. You can get a guy that's already, been developed or been in a weight room at a Power 5 program, or a Georgia or a Alabama, for instance, when you have a Chadarius Townsend here. at Texas Tech. And I think that's really what he's doing is he figured out what he needed to kind of work on, as you guys kind of saw with the recruiting rankings and just kind of looking at what they've been recruiting. Defensive line, offensive line were certainly some big things. Recently, they just added another defensive back, so the secondary was certainly something that they were looking to fill in. But I think just overall, just selling himself and the program, and just that there's a new turn here. And the fact that they won a bowl game last year certainly helps as well.
My question's a quarterback-related question. I think one of the biggest tricks he pulled so far, and not only is this recruiting class and the transfers he's brought in, but keeping all three of those quarterbacks on campus. If I made you put your June paycheck on the line, who are you picking to take the first snap for Texas Tech in this season? And would that still be the same choice if I asked you who do you think takes the most snaps at quarterback for Texas Tech this season?
I think it might be a different answer in terms of snaps, but in terms of who's starting, I would be shocked if it's not Tyler Shuck. He obviously transferred here to get playing time, didn't pan out the way he wanted to last year. If he would have stayed healthy, depending on who you were reading or the draft grades you were looking at, he could have been a first-round pick last year with the way he was throwing and the way that people were looking at him and his prototypical, quarterback, 6'5", 225 frame. But that didn't work out, so he's looking to run it back. And the one good thing about Joey McGuire that kind of worked out last year when you saw Henry Columbia at the time when he was kind of, showing his dual threat athletic ability. You've got that with the Donovan Smith, and a Barron Morton can be a nice change of pace type guy. But the one thing that you have to like about Joey McGuire, and again, it just goes back to the person that he is. I'm sure that there are some other conversations that we're not, privy to, but you have a lot of opportunity at Texas Tech, and Tyler Shuck is certainly going to be the first one to take a crack at it just based on his experience, the ability to learn the playbook so quickly, the fact that he's been able to focus on football because of the way he's done his academics and being able to get a master's degree, so he's able to focus more on football. But then you look at Donovan Smith, he's a proven quarterback that was the offensive MVP last year at the Liberty Bowl, so you certainly have a pretty good backup quarterback in that sense. And then another reserve in Barron Morton, who's one of your top-rated quarterbacks. They're all Red Raiders, as Joey McGuire's like to say, and I think at least for right now, as you guys said, we'll see how things pan out during the season, but right now everything's at least golden in terms of what Joey McGuire's been able to do once he did get the job last year.
I find the prospects of the 2022 Texas Tech offense to be really fascinating. Like, we think of Texas Tech as this pass-happy team. Zach Kittley, as his last two stops, throws the ball all around. But then you look at the roster, and I think I could argue that the running back room is the strength of that offense. The offensive line gets 5 new transfers. At least 2 or 3 of those guys are going to start and really retool that group. Where do you think that this offense falls in terms of, like, run-pass dynamic? Do we see it kind of be more of like what we've seen from Kittley the last few years? Or like you mentioned, McGuire kind of wanted to have that West Texas tough team. Do we kind of see a little bit more run from him than maybe we've seen, at Western Kentucky or Houston Baptist?
I hate to be this guy, but I think it all depends on the game plan and the team that they're playing. But I certainly do feel like there's going to be a lot more of a emphasis to run the ball, to milk the clock, especially at the end of games, or if you're trying to, give your defense a rest after a really long offensive drive previously when they're, going up against an offense that could be, grinded out type team. But I do agree with you guys. You look at SaRodorick Thompson, Taj Brooks, Cameron Valdez. They've got a lot of talent there, but they certainly have a lot of talent at the wide receiver position. It's just it's one of those unproven rooms. You look at the players that aren't there anymore. Eric Ezukanma, the main one, who's now with the Miami Dolphins. And after that, you look at, you got Miles Price, you got Jerron Bradley, who showed some sparks during the Liberty Bowl game against Mississippi State. And then, J.J. Sparkman, just a lot of unproven guys. But the one thing that Joey McGuire said during the spring is there's a lot of a chance to prove yourself. And certainly Jerron Bradley has been that guy that's really done that during the spring. It's Loic Fungi and some other guys have been, healing their injuries, pardon me.
Yeah, Miles Price may catch over 100 balls. Like, when I went there for the magazine stuff, I, said the name Zach Kittley. I didn't even finish it. And he was, smiling, So I know the wide receivers are really excited to play in that new offense. To move over to the defensive side of the ball, how realistic is it to expect Tim DeRuyter to make a kind of a big change with this group in year one? Or is this kind of more of a long-term project than maybe the offense is?
I certainly think it's a long-term project just in terms of getting the type of players you want to get. But in terms of what they want to do, you look at what they do on the Twitter machine, the hashtag Take Three. They're looking to get 3 takeaways during a game, and according to Joey McGuire when he was talking about it after the spring game, if you are +3 in turnovers in a game, you're going to win 93% of your games. Now, again, there's a lot of stats that happen, but certainly when you look at something like that, that just goes to show the type of emphasis that Joey McGuire wants to do, which is something Keith Patterson, the previous defensive coordinator, was trying to do. The more turnovers you get, the more chances your, in theory, prolific offense, has a chance at scoring. And unfortunately, last year, just the offense wasn't able to kind of get going. And if you're able to get it going this year, things could change and there could be some upsets. And I think that's what really has fans really kind of, a little bit excited for this team, as they saw what could have been when they did beat Mississippi State in the Liberty Bowl. But again, you just have to continue that momentum. And certainly if they're able to do that on the defensive end by getting some of these bigger defensive linemen that can plug up holes, that can help the linebackers, move freely, get those tackles, and you're able to get some of these defensive backs that are a little bit more physical, at the point of attack. I think that's certainly going to be a huge positive result for the Texas Tech Red Raiders if they're able to, turn things around in terms of getting some turnovers on the defensive end.
Yeah, it feels like McGuire and Texas Tech are in this obvious honeymoon stage. He's on the Dave Campbell's cover. He's only getting good publicity. Everybody seems to love him. The resources are going up. People are donating money. How long does that last, right? Like, is it 1 year? Is it 2 years? Like, how long? I know Texas Tech has kind of gone through a couple coaches lately. One of them, Cliff Kingsbury being kind of their own guy. Matt Wells never really seemed to, really ingratiate himself with the fan base. Like, how long does this kind of feel-good stage last? Like, does he need to win right away, or is there an understanding that, this may take a little bit longer than just, one season?
I mean, I may be in the minority here, but I think the fact that you've got the transfer portal helps you be successful a lot quicker than you would normally think to have those 3 to 5 year, recruiting plans. Now, again, he signed a long-term deal, so I think just the administration feels like they're going to give him some time to get things straightened out. And I think just looking at the schedule, which I'm sure you all have, kind of talked about for a little bit, but it's a pretty difficult schedule when you look at who they got to play at North Carolina State, Murray State. You've got to host Houston. It's going to be a very difficult schedule, especially in the Big 12 Conference. And I think there's a lot of realistic fans now where they kind of realize, okay, you know what, we've got the guy that we wanted, which again goes back to your question in terms of Matt Wells not being the guy that they wanted initially when it was reported Dana Holgorsen wasn't talked to during his hiring process. So the fact that the fans got who they wanted in Joey McGuire, I think that gives them that extra year or two, which I would say he's got at least 2 to 3 years here at Texas Tech, especially, again, like I said, with that transfer portal, you're able to find and, plug in some successful players or some key pieces that you feel could be the thing that could take you to that next step or that next level, if you will, for the offense or the defense. And I think if you get those 2 to 3 years, and if you're able to get a couple wins or even get a winning record or a bowl win, who knows what could happen on the recruiting trails, especially like you guys just alluded to at the start of this. It's just all that momentum's huge. It's just can you continue that? Because if you are, the team could be really, really good down in the future when you kind of look at what they've been able to do on the recruiting rounds.
And then lastly for me, with this new look Big 12, Texas and Oklahoma leaving the conference, is there kind of like this renewed feeling of like this conference is wide open and it's up for the grabs for us to go take? Can you sense that around the program? Because it feels like I can sense that around the state at these Big 12 programs that are staying behind.
Well, I think you certainly look at that. You look at Oklahoma State, and heck, even if you look at Houston and some of the incoming teams, a UCF or a BYU, that they all feel like who's going to be the two that are going to be the top tier teams once this new Big 12 does come to fruition. And I think Texas Tech is certainly in a position to do that. You guys already talked about all the donations that have been happening, obviously all the new athletic facilities that are being planned to, help out football. Baseball just started there. So I think there's a lot of positive momentum in that sense. And I think, again, it goes without saying, but the wins are going to help a lot. Not the losses, so to speak, but if you get your winning going and the football team starts going, you can see that you can just surmise that this athletic program is going to be very, very good in the future.
Alrighty. Appreciate your time, Carlos, man. We'll be paying attention to what you and Don are doing over there in Lubbock because obviously Joey McGuire is one of the biggest hires in the state, and Texas Tech is kind of one of the biggest storylines we've kept our eye on, obviously, with the magazine and all. So we appreciate your time, man.
No, appreciate you all, and good luck on the live.
Thank you very much. That was Carlos Silva. You can follow him at SCM Silva Jr. on Twitter. Like I said, there's not many more people more plugged in than he and Don Williams over there in Lubbock.
Sure.
So after these talks, we usually talk a little bit about the program
itself.
And kind of going off of what Carlos said, Craven, you mentioned kind of the honeymoon phase, right? And how he kind of hits at he thinks the transfer portal kind of gives him, I want to say, like, less room to, like, I guess less excuse to, like, maybe bottom out, right, per se. That's probably the wrong word to use or phrase to use. But do you kind of agree with that, or how do you feel? Because I know we've kind of gone back and forth on, like, what to exactly expect from Tech this year on the field.
I think the transfer portal has evened out the playing field. Like, I feel like the runway's gotten shorter and shorter and shorter throughout our lifetime. Like, you used to get 3 or 4 years, and now you get like 1 year before people start complaining about you, right? Like, Sarkisian's
I was just
not
about to
on
bring
the
Sarkisian.
hot seat,
Right.
But like, Alabama beats Texas 50-3 on September 10th, and he absolutely is.
Yeah.
So like, I think McGuire gets more, leeway than that. But I think Carlos's point is correct. Like, you don't have to wait 3 years to develop an offensive line anymore. Like, he just went and got 5 guys,
Right.
And like, when I was out there in the magazine, you know how McGuire is. Like, he doesn't lie to you, right? Like, he hadn't been a college head coach long enough to know to lie to you. He's like, listen, we got to find 5 of them here. Like, we got enough dudes now to find the offensive line. So I do think, like, in years past, you would get a head coaching job. You would look at your roster and you go, man, linebacker's just not good, or offensive line's just not good, or whatever position it may be, and you have to wait 2 or 3 years to really get it fixed to the way you want it. That's not true anymore. Like, now you can go to the transfer portal and make instant fixes. Offensive line, defensive line, probably the biggest areas of need for Texas Tech. With the transfer portal, you can go get grown men who are ready to step in and play right away. I do think that helps, but at Texas Tech, you need 2 years.
Yeah.
Like, I
think so.
I'm not going to really start grading Joey McGuire, the football coach, until 2024. That's just me personally, because it still takes a little bit of time to shift cultures.
Yeah, because I was looking at, obviously you look at their schedule, right? We've talked about, Carlos mentioned some of even the non-conference games, right? Murray State's not a pushover in FBS, right? That's going to be an interesting, on paper, obviously Tech should roll them, right? They were about 500 last year, but in 2020, they were one of the better teams in FCS, I should say. I believe they beat number 16 Southeast Missouri. They lost by just 2 scores to number 12 Jacksonville State. Like, they're a formidable FCS program. So even their quote-unquote money game, easy game, is still a team that you got to at least get up out of bed for, right? That doesn't even include, obviously, Houston, NC State, and then you get Texas in your Big 12 opener, right? And then all of a sudden, that's, we kind of mentioned Houston and Tech last year as like the narrative game. Texas is going to have something potentially at that point to play for, to really show, because that'll be post-Bama for them. That'll be an interesting spot for where they are. And it doesn't get easier, right? Kansas State, Oklahoma State, West Virginia, Baylor, TCU, Kansas, Iowa State, Oklahoma. Like, there's no rest stops in there.
I don't think NC State's a cakewalk either.
No,
They've got a great linebacker.
They're top 10 team.
I was about to say, they're probably the favorites to win the ACC, like at least heading into
according to Dave Campbell's Texas football.
Yeah.
Hey, there you go, man.
Spoiler.
There you go. for people that are still waiting, because it's
and
delayed.
just
But
waiting to buy the magazine for our
for
ACC
NC
preview.
State. To see what Mike Craven said about us.
Clemson back?
I think Michigan State's in there too, actually. I may have
There's
sneaked
one
something in
NC
there.
State fan in the state going, finally! Thank God. Wolfpack, baby. But no, like, I agree. Like, the transfer portal does give him that avenue, right? That little cheat code, right? Like, it does for everybody, I think. But there is a honeymoon phase that's going to fade a little bit, right? It's eventually you got to play football, right? If things ended now, Texas Tech would have the number 2 recruiting class in the nation. Joey McGuire's king of Lubbock, and he gets a lifetime contract, and you're good to go, right? And everybody has a happy story. But the minute they probably lose to Houston, right? Like, all of a sudden it's like, oh, what happened?
That game's fascinating.
That game's very fascinating, especially because, again, we were considering last year, the loser of that game's getting fired, right? Like, we just kind of thought, it's like we just assumed that that's
Which
how
shows
that was
how
gonna
little
go.
we know, right?
No, exactly.
Because the loser
right?
of that game now has a lifetime contract, basically.
And the winner got
Houston,
fired.
And the winner got fired.
I know.
College football's crazy.
It's crazy. So, that will be fascinating. But I do think a lot of people in Lubbock understand the kind of the time period on that.
Yep.
Mallory, do we got any others that we should talk about, or
I think we're good.
Okay. Cool.
We
That'll do it
we
for-
talked through
yeah.
Texas Tech, so
We did. We
there
did
you
talk
go.
through
There's
Texas
your
Tech,
preview.
so
Your
there's your
2022
preview.
season preview.
Over under.
Yeah.
6
Ooh,
wins.
good one. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
I think I'm even.
Yeah.
Right. I think even is
6
the
and
sa-
6 is
I
a
think
good-
even's the sa- I think if I had to pick one though, it's more likely they go 5-7 than 7-5 with that schedule.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's a good point.
They're going to have to beat Houston or Texas. Like they're going to have to
There's
pull.
a-
They're
there's
going
an
to have
upset
to
early
win
in
a
the year.
big. They're going to have to pull an upset at some
When
point.
I was doing the magazine, I was like, man, how do I get them to 6 wins? You
Right.
know, because it's like I don't 5
right.
and 7.
Right.
Like, I don't
Because
know,
you
like,
put their
'cause
coach
they're-
on the cover.
because
and
they're a
you're just like,
better team than that.
Sure.
Like, they're a better team this year than they were last year, and I think it's not only possible, but maybe even likely that they don't go to a bowl game this year.
Sure.
Despite having their coach in place rather than last year where they fired
Yeah.
their coach in the middle of the season. Like that's just how hard that schedule is this year.
They've just got a tough path. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and we'll
I'm
say
gonna
6
say
and
6.
6.
I'm
I
gonna
was gonna
say
6
Murray
and 6.
State, Kansas State, West Virginia, TCU, Kansas, Iowa State.
Yeah, so
I
TCU.
I think that's-
TCU's that bridge game, right?
Yeah,
Where it's
I'm gonna
like
say they
five wins we can get to easy.
I'm gonna say they go into November hot.
Right.
And then that Oklahoma game obviously is what it is, but I think that they get a 3-game win streak with TCU, Kansas, Iowa State, and I think that'll be
I think Houston, Texas, TCU
yes.
are kind of those make or break games for Texas Tech because like they get Texas at a good time.
Sure.
Like unless Texas somehow upsets Tech.
I was about to say I'll see
Alabama.
what Texas game before and after that is, but
But they're kind of sandwiched between Alabama and OU, I believe, off the top of my head.
they're after, so it's after UTSA, and then before West Virginia. So
Right.
That's a good place to be.
That's not bad, yeah.
And
Yeah.
so and then that TCU game is an important one. Like they got to come up with the 6th win somewhere.
sure.
And
Right.
so it's going to be interesting, but like I do think this year's a free year.
Mhm.
You know, even if they go 5-7, I think this year's a free year. It's how they play,
Yeah.
not necessarily what their record is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. So with that being said, I guess that'll do it for our first live show.
It did.
Yeah. Little hint towards next week, we'll be doing UTSA.
Yes.
So
yes.
we've given hints.
Meep.
There you go. So as if Craven couldn't get more homerish.
I know.
Picking Texas players now, saying meep unsolicited. Anyway, so we'll be talking with a UTSA writer, and we'll be doing that next week. And let me see, I'm trying to think. Subscribe everywhere, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you've tuned into the live stream, right? Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. What else are we on? What's another
Twitch.
What's
I
another
think.
streaming thing? Twitch.
Twitch,
Twitch
yep.
is another one.
Tell who turned 30 this year. What's the other one?
Woo,
What's the
we have some shots fired
Instagram,
on here.
I
Twitter.
don't know what I did.
Twitch?
I don't know what I did here.
Switch?
I have a Twitch account. I was just anyway. I don't
Smells
know
like,
what I
smells
did.
like old in here.
I don't know what I did. Anyway.
Oh man, I know that was a shot at me, but that was pretty good.
No, I don't approve of
just
that.
kidding.
As my gray hair
I'm trying to close the
glistens
show
off
out
it.
if you can't tell. As a reminder, though, in closing, for Mike Craven and Mallory Hardley, I'm Ishmael Johnson. But as a reminder, we have interviewed 11 of the 12 FBS coaches in the state of Texas. 11 of the 12. Jimbo Fisher, give us a call back.
Come join our
Talk to you
podcast.
guys next week.
Peace.